Welcome to Fueling Your Legacy, hosted by Samuel Knickerbocker. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a new, stronger foundation essential in creating your legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. Welcome back to Fuel Your Legacy, and it is Book Review Wednesday, one of my favorite days of the week because it's a time when I get to come together with you and share the things that I've learned from some of the books that I've read. Today, we're going to be discussing a book called No Excuses, The Power of Self-Discipline by Brian Tracy. This book I first discovered, probably 6 years ago when I was doing summer sales, and I would listen to this book almost on repeat while I was out knocking doors because it was so clear about self-control, self-mastery, and then discipline and self-discipline. How are we educating ourselves? How are we training ourselves to do what we need to do? So that's really what we're going to be talking about today. One of the things that just stuck out right at kind of the beginning of the book is, do you know what you need to do? And do you do what you know you need to do when you need to do it? That is basically the definition of self-discipline. Do what you know you need to do when you need to do it. How many people, and I will lump myself into this in different areas of my life, right, where you know you should be doing something, but it's just too much effort. I just don't want to do it. And so sometimes people will go and they'll ask for help. They already know the answer to what they need to do, but they'll ask for help. And then when they get the answer of what to do, they still don't do it. That's a disrespect of the people you're asking. So I have people in my life right now, okay, and this is just being real honest with you, right, that I know could help me get my health way, way, way better under control. It's not an ultimate priority of mine. It's on the stove, if you could say. It's probably on the back burner. I'm moderately healthy. I've adopted probably 50 to 60% of the habits that have been said that I should adopt. But outside of that, I haven't really adopted tons and tons of all of the diehard habits of exercise or healthy eating, things like that. And so for me, I have things that I intentionally haven't asked for help yet because I know that if they did answer me and give me the answers, I probably wouldn't do it. And so understanding that where you're at on the journey is really, really important. But this comes back to this question: in the area of health, okay, we'll call it in health because that's my weakness. In the area of health, do I know what I need to do, and do I do what I know I need to do when I need to do it? And I don't always do that. So that's an area that I'm working on. And yet in other areas of my life, then there is I know what I need to do and I do it when I need to do it. And so that's really the focus of this podcast. And we're talking about no excuses, self-discipline. One of the things that he kind of brings up right in this beginning of the book is this idea of what's called someday I'll, right? And he says this is a disease and a lot of people have it, and they just keep thinking, someday I will get to there. Someday I'll do this. And he says this is like an island, and we need to vote ourselves off the island. We need to say, look, we're no longer going to be on this island of someday I'll. We're going to be fully committed to every aspect of our lives. And so that's kind of the direction he brings people in on this. And so then he says that the same things successful people don't like to do are the same things that unsuccessful people don't like to do. The only real contrast between a successful person and a non-successful person is the successful person does what they don't like to do anyways. They just simply do it anyways. So what in your life do you know you should be doing, but you're not doing? And in that circumstances, what would you be willing to do anyways? So one thing that I put off for a long time and made excuses in my life, right after I had my first kid, I was really good at journaling. I had journaled every day for virtually every day. I probably missed like a handful of days, but almost every day for 3 or 4 years, 5 or 6 years out almost. And then when I got married, still was doing good journaling. Then I had our baby, and I just used all of the excuses of, I was waking up early, I wasn't getting enough sleep, it was hard to focus, whatever excuses I used. So for the first 2 years of Declan's life, I probably have a total of 50 journal entries. Okay, like just not very many. But that was something that I recommitted the beginning of this year, that I was going to write in my journal every day. And when I say every day, I'm going to clarify that I'm somebody who does like to process things over time. And so I have chosen, I journal for every day once a week. I do it on Sunday. It's a meditation, takes generally 2 to 3 hours of really analyzing, going back over my week and reviewing my week, see what happened, see how I felt about it, see what I'm grateful for, and what am I going to change? What did I learn from these experiences, and how am I going to move forward in the next week? And that's a deep meditation for me that I had gotten out of the practice of doing. And now I recommitted at the beginning of the year, and I don't plan on stopping. I love journaling. It's been a good process for me. And not everybody has the same form of meditation, but that's a meditation that I really, really receive a lot of fulfillment from, and guidance. And I'm able to really play with my thoughts and process through things that it's not always easiest to process through in the beginning. So, but when I ask other people, hey, are you journaling? Are you gratitude journaling? Are you writing down the things that you love every day? Are you focused on where you're going? Then say, oh, it's just too hard. It's just, I don't have time, right? Everybody has time. We all have the same amount of time. It's what we choose to do with our time. And so the same things that I'm doing in that area, other people will say they don't want to do it. So learning how to do things and taking the time to do it, there's always something quote unquote better to do with our time, or more relaxing to do with our time, or easier to do with our time. Watching TV, watching Netflix, just sitting around playing on our phones, eating, going for a walk. I mean, there's tons of things that are easier to do than sitting down and spending time with yourself. And in my experience, I get the biggest reward and I get the most movement out of spending time with myself. So learning to do that has been a huge area of no excuses, self-discipline. I got to learn to be disciplined in this area. Next is to look around and ask, has what I want to do ever been achieved by someone with more challenges than me? The goal is to remove excuses from the reasons we aren't succeeding in life. And so many people, I had talked about this with you the other day, but while I was on a cruise a few weeks ago, I was talking to my little sister, and she's like, I don't know how I could possibly make 100,000 or 200,000 or whatever the number was, how I could make that much money as a waiter. And the question is, okay, I understand that. I understand that you don't know how to do it. First question is, do you want to do it? Second question is, has that ever been done by somebody else before? Yes. Okay. Well, if it has been done by somebody else before, what did they do, and what can I do to do that? And that's really the key question, rather than letting excuses be there. I just can't do it. I don't know how to do it. Just look around and say, okay, well, who else in my life has done it? This is something that's crazy. I'm going to have a guest on here in the future who is paralyzed from like the waist down, and he is a motocross racer, and he still continues to race even though he's paralyzed. In fact, the world champion, she's from, I believe, Finland, and she is same as him, paralyzed from the waist down, yet she's the world champion because she didn't let her excuses define her. She didn't let the things that were not perfect in her life hold her back. And that's something we all have to go through. We all have to choose into that belief that we can do it, and then look around us and say, who in our life has actually already done it? Who's already done this? And if we can find somebody who's already done it, then we have no excuses, right? There's people who have come to America with less knowledge of our system, with less English, with less everything other than more of a work ethic. And they've been able to create multi-million-dollar companies or billion-dollar companies. Naveen Jain, he is a billionaire. He came to this country with just a few dollars in his pocket, and he's created a billion-dollar company out of it because of his work ethic, his devotion to his passion and his identity. And he's really been helping a lot of people, and is now focused on helping people map the genetic code and the gut biome so that they can be healthier, down to a scientific level of how and what each person should be eating to make them healthier. Now, that would never have been possible if he didn't apply himself and focus on that. He came with less. He had less than I did when I was born and into America. So he had less of an opportunity, less language, less everything. And yet he's been able to produce something even more than what I've been able to produce up to this point in my life. So understanding that there's other people who have had less advantages and yet have accomplished more, then there's no more excuses. Helen Keller is a great example as well. She was deaf and blind, and yet she learned to read and speak um, just fine because she was committed to that. So now anybody who's deaf and blind can't use the excuse, well, I just can't. No, you can. Whether you choose to or not is another story. And that goes back to the story with my son trying to turn on the lights. And we're like, yes, you can do it. You can do it. You can do it. And finally, he said, I don't want to can, right? I don't want to be able to do it. And that's okay. I mean, he's 2.5 years old. So I understand that from his perspective and the learning process that he's at. But thinking about that, what is it that in your life you're choosing you don't want to can right now? You don't want to be able to do it. I was sitting down with a real estate broker and explaining how certain things could maybe get him a better rate of return on his money or complement what he's doing. And he says, well, if you read Think and Grow Rich and you read, what's the other one? Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, then they say only invest in things that you know. And I totally agree, man. I'm not asking you to make a blind investment into something. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, are you willing to know more? Are you willing to learn a little bit more so that you can now diversify your investments? Or are you going to stick with just the one thing? And that's where I think the no excuse, the power of self-discipline plays into this comment, looking around and saying, hey, is anybody that's had my same excuses, in air quotes, accomplish things anyways? And if so, what did they do? How can I do it? And that's a big question there. And I love that because that's what motivates me rather than sitting there saying, I don't know how to do it or I can't do it. It's more of, okay, who can help me? Who can help me do this? Who can help me accomplish this? And that I've made all of the major improvements in my career have been because I was willing to ask, okay, who else has done it and who else can help me? And going and seeking out that expert advice. So next, when we are scared of failure, because that's the next excuse is we're scared of failure. So how do we overcome the fear of failure? And this is something that on the doors, knocking doors, helped me a ton because I don't know anybody who really loves rejection. There's people who have learned to frame it in their mind to where they don't mind it. They've been able to move past it. They see it as progress, but nobody loves being rejected. Like inherently, we want acceptance. And so nobody loves being rejected. But that being said, how do we deal with things? And this comes up with my wife and I all the time. She's like, Sam, how are you calm in this situation? All this stuff is happening. All these people are not being cooperative, or the children they didn't get enough sleep, right? Whatever it is, this comes up in every aspect of our lives. Well, I learned at a young age to create what's called a disaster report. Okay, so what is a disaster report and how do we do it? So it basically consists of 3 questions. Okay, so the first question is maybe 4 questions. So 4 questions. What is the worst case scenario? Okay, so that's the first aspect of the disaster report. What is the worst case scenario? Once we have identified what the worst case scenario is, we just go all the way down to the worst case scenario. This is also a feature of positive psychology, identifying, hey, what's the worst that could happen? Well, as long as that doesn't happen, we're good. So what's the worst thing that could happen? Now, am I okay with the worst case scenario? If the worst case scenario were to happen, can I get to a state of being okay with that? So that's the second question. Am I okay with the worst case scenario? Third question is, what would cause the worst case scenario to happen? Like what factors would have to be in play to make the worst case scenario happen? Once we've identified what would cause it, then the last question is how do I mitigate the risk, right? Because we still want to mitigate the risk. We don't want the worst case scenario to happen, but we have to be okay with the worst case scenario happening for us to take the next step. And that's the key. So complete a disaster report in every situation in your life where you're having fear, anxiety, maybe depression. Maybe you're holding back on a business decision because you're scared of what might happen. You're scared to make an investment in a house. You're scared to put money on a credit card. You're scared to do something because you're scared of what might happen. Well, just get okay with worst case scenario. Worst case scenario is probably you become paralyzed and you have a ton of medical bills and then you go bankrupt. I mean, that's like the worst case scenario. And then you start over. And maybe you're relying on friends, family, church, state, whatever the case is. So get okay with the worst case scenario and then begin to mitigate the risk. Begin to say, okay, I'm okay with it. Well, what would cause that to happen? How can I eliminate some of those factors so that even if those did happen, it wouldn't be that bad, right? So insurance is a big way that we focus on the worst case scenario, and then we go about mitigating the risk through car insurance, home insurance, like appliance insurance, phone insurance, right? We say, okay, what's the worst case scenario with my $1,100 phone? Well, the worst case scenario is it dies or whatever happens. Okay, well, if I drop it and it breaks, do I have insurance on it? Yeah, we have insurance. So now we aren't as concerned about the worst case scenario because we're paying a little fee to mitigate the risk. So anyways, just something to think about for all of your excuses. If you go through a complete disaster report for every one of your excuses, then it really puts into perspective and can alleviate you from a lot of fear and concern before you take that next step into doing those things that you know are uncomfortable, that you don't want to do, but you do them anyways because they're the right thing to do. And then the phrase that he uses a few times throughout the book is that persistence is the enactment of self-discipline. So self-discipline in and of itself is a concept, but then persistence, if you ever give up, then maybe you don't have the self-discipline, but you got to persist until you succeed. And when you're doing that, be clear. So I hear this often in other podcasts and other people talk about this, got to persist until you succeed. And it kind of goes along with the 3 feet from gold mentality that I talked about a few months ago, but you don't have to persist in the same direction. If something's not working, don't persist in doing something that's not working. Persist in your end goal, right? Persist in pursuing your end goal. Don't persist in doing something that's not working. If it's not working, adjust, change, ask for help, get help from somebody else, ask for input, right? Don't continue to do something that you don't like, it's not working. That's the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result. Okay. Don't put yourself through that. Persist in the end goal, which means you're going to have to alter your way of how to accomplish that. That is what persistence is. And that's the enactment of self-discipline, doing what you know you need to do, even when it's not easy, even when nobody else wants to do it, doing what you know you need to do when you need to do it because it's the right thing to do. So that is kind of the overall and overarching objective of this book, is to help people remove all their excuses and focus in on how can they mitigate the risk and how can they be more disciplined in their execution of what they're going for. And that is going to wrap it up for today. I love this book. It's probably in one of my top 3 that I read every year, along with Think and Grow Rich, Outwitting the Devil, and How to Win Friends and Influence People. Those are my top 3. I guess this would be top 4 of books that I've read multiple times because of the content and the ability to really help you focus in on, okay, what excuses am I using today in my business? When I do my guest interview podcast, you hear kind of the last, it's the first question part of the Legacy on Rapid Fire, and it's what's holding you back from from reaching the next level of your legacy today. And people will often say, oh, well, it's myself. Myself is holding me back. Hey, that's a great kind of excuse or something, but the reality is just saying yourself, that's better than blaming somebody else for sure. But just saying yourself, well, what about yourself is holding you back? If you're not aware of what about yourself is holding you back, how are you ever going to change it? How are you ever going to progress past it? And so I may actually change that question in my guest podcast, because I want people to be giving me more answers about what about themselves is holding them back from reaching the next level. So that being said, super excited for this week. We have James on, and he is a really inspiring story of somebody who went from corporate America and transitioned into entrepreneurship and things that he loves doing, regardless of the risk. He took the risk and he's been successful, but he mitigated the risk as well. And so it's a great story to kind of understand the disaster report and how to accomplish moving into something you enjoy doing and gaining success in the process. So that being said, we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy. Thanks for joining us today. If what you heard resonated with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me so I can give you a shout out on the next episode. And thanks to all those who have left a review. It helps spread the message of what it really takes to build a legacy that lasts. Catch you next time on Fueling Your Legacy.